Okay, hello and welcome again to session 3 of Emotional Intelligence and Quantum Physics with myself, Ishad, and my co-host, Nini. We did try to do this last week, but my Wi-Fi didn't want to play ball. So we are trying this again, but never mind, these things happen. So the topic of today's session is the need to be right. So we'll be exploring, well, for a start, where does it come from? From various range of sources that you may have seen on the advertising, via Newton, Heisenberg, the Beatles, our brain. It will all make sense, trust me. And really, it's something that I guess comes through all of us a lot of the time, right? That we have this inherent need to be right. So, in whatever field we choose to pick, whether it's a discussion, a debate, a decision, all seems to impinge on our self-worth. So, look, without further ado, let's crack on. So, again, when Nini and I were planning these sessions, she came up with this great comparison to the works of Isaac Newton and Heisenberg about how they, view the universe and introducing theory. So, Nini, if you want to just set the scene for everybody.
Okay, cool. So basically, what it is that Sir Isaac Newton set the universe in a very clockwork system that if you know everything in the past, with 100% predictability and perfection, you can predict everything in the future. Everything is set, everything is known. It makes things very neat. And for many centuries, that was the going thing in physics. And then Einstein came and demonstrated through his theory of relativity that that is not true. And last time we had spoken, actually, I wanted to say we spoke about the topic of mistakes. I actually made a big mistake. I don't know. Einstein might be a little upset with me. The speed of light is constant. And last time I said everyone has a different measure for the speed of light based on how fast they're going. I meant to say the speed of time. Everyone in a relatively different motion has a different measurement of the speed of time. I said the speed of light. So Einstein, I am so sorry. I messed that up. But, we can laugh about it. And those who are diehard physics fans, maybe you caught it. Maybe it just went over your head. I don't know. I just felt the need to say it. But focusing back with, so Newton came with this idea. Einstein, with his theory of relativity, demonstrated that time is not fixed, and based on how fast you're going, it does change. And Heisenberg demonstrated with his uncertainty principle that if you know one thing, like if you know a physical particle's motion, you do not know its location. And if you know its location, you do not know, more accurately, its momentum. And the way that I kind of explain that is, imagine if you're like me riding a bicycle or let's say driving a car, and you're driving at, let's say, 25 kilometers per hour down the street. You know that speed, but you're constantly passing up places. You don't know exactly where you are. You might know generally you're taking a certain road, but you don't know exactly where you are because your location is constantly in flux. It's constantly changing, but you know your speed. You know your momentum. Speed and momentum are not the same. A topic for another discussion. However, now let's say you're at a stoplight and you are now going at momentum 0. You know exactly which street you're on. You can sit there and say, well, I'm at rest. I'm not, the momentum is 0. But you can't say that's true because, 0 relative to what? Maybe I'm at speed 0 relative to planet Earth that I'm on, but planet Earth is zipping through cyberspace at God knows what speeds, which is, going around the sun. The sun is zipping through cyberspace around the massive black hole in the center of our galaxy, et cetera, et cetera. We don't exactly know. So Heisenberg explains there is always a measurement of uncertainty, and that is by, it's by default. It's not that there's something flawed with our measurement tools. It's not that there's something flawed with us. It's not even a flaw. It's just the idea that we know everything with certainty, like Newton wanted to suggest, is been proven to be not accurate. And I'm going to say illusory. And when I say the word illusion doesn't mean that it's not there. Illusion simply means it's not what it appears to be. So we think there's predictability because, the sun rises and sets, but really the sun doesn't exactly rise and set. The earth revolves and rotates, and then the sun is also revolving and rotating. So it's not what we think it is. So nothing is ever known with certainty, and Heisenberg demonstrates with his uncertainty principle that not everything is known with certainty, which leads us back to the idea of there being one absolute, I'm right, you're wrong, is not exactly certain either. There might be an idea of a collaborative, everyone puts his or her relative truth together to get a sum greater than a whole greater than the sum of its parts to get a bigger truth. But then what does that even mean? So everyone's relative truth is going to be different, and there's no way to really measure, well, my truth is better than your truth. Okay, for me, my truth for me might be better than your truth would be for me. But there's no real way to say who's right and who's wrong, because everyone's relative truth is subjective, if that makes sense.
Perfectly. I think you've stumbled upon a great point there about often we enter into debates, discussions, arguments, what I call ego battles, with a perspective of, to hark back to a analogy from one of our earlier sessions, we've collapsed our spectrum of possibilities and probabilities down to a singular point. The analogy we used there was of the ice cream shop, where from a range of flavors in the shop, you go and pick one due to your information set at the time. Other people may have told you about a certain flavor. It might be your favorite flavor that you've gone and picked because that's what you always pick. And, it was a nice experience. You enjoyed the ice cream. And then next time you go back into the shop, instead of looking at the same menu again, you've gone, oh no, I like the one I had last time, so I'll just pick that one. So instead of considering all the possibilities, you've collapsed it down to one because of the sense of you were proved right last time, depending on what your parameters were of, okay, I think I might like the ice cream. Yes, I did. I'm right. So I'm going to use that again. You kind of want to shield yourself away from the uncertainty of, if I pick that sort of funky sounding flavor and I don't like it, well, I've lost my money. I might not come back again. And, all sorts of, as you said, uncertainty comes into it. But where we enter into these ego battles, we have that perspective of our opinion being interlinked with our self-worth. So all of a sudden, instead of going, right, do you know what? That other person might actually be right. You might not on the face of it agree with what they're saying, but we have this idea that, like, if my opinion is challenged and compromised, then I might look naive, gullible, ill-informed. So therefore, I don't want to feel those things because in my experience, they're unacceptable emotions to feel. So, rather than being sort of flexible with our opinion, understanding that, as you mentioned, that with the uncertainty theory abound, that like there's very little in this world that is bona fide fact. Even you mentioned the sun rising. You're right, relative to what? These bodies in space have their own orbits and measures of time, etc., etc. Even systems that we've made, like maths. We all learnt that 2 + 2 is 4. Either from our teachers at school or Barney, that dinosaur that kept repeating it over and over on TV, right? But yeah, some could even challenge that notion of, well, 2 + 2 might not actually be 4, but that's a massive rabbit hole. That's probably not for this session. But I wanted to link that, Nini, to the point you made from the book you're reading about the master and his emissary, where it was talking about our two hemispheres of the brain, which we know sort of cooperate and interlink with each other. But how that then linked to the aspect of religion, where, humankind as it began ate from the tree of knowledge. But before we get onto that part, I wonder if you could just go through the master and the mystery part.
Okay, so The Master and His Emissary, it's an amazing book, and I keep forgetting to look up the author. It's I read it once, and I'm reading it a second time, and the second time I've reread things, and I'm not a rereader, but that's how good it is. It's like I really want to take this in because I feel it's so profound. So just a little, I'm not going to do it justice, but a basic summary is, first he goes on, the anatomy and physiology of the brain and how it works. He addresses the hard problem of consciousness. How can you use subatomic particles to boot up this mass consciousness? That's a reductionistic theory, which again, that's topic for another time of, they only believe that a whole is the sum of its parts. The understanding that there's a one source that is fundamental to the many, and the many just comes back to that one source, which is greater than the sum of its parts. It goes back and forth in this dance. Anyways, but what the right brain and the left brain represent is the right brain sees kind of like the aha moment. It gets direct information from the source itself. It receives that direct knowledge. So think about it, like you have this aha, like, oh my gosh, I got this idea, I got this amazing idea, okay, wow, and your friend is like, okay, what's your idea? And you're like, wait, I have to like unpack it, I have to like process it. So that processing, that unpacking is the left brain saying, okay, we're the rational team, from the word ratio, rational, we can delineate this massive aha because, as it is, it's raw. your audience is not going to get it. It's like before the food is digested, it can't be used, it can't be broken down. You have enzymes which speed up the reaction, which make it a sequential step-by-step process so that your body can utilize the nutrients. It's that kind of an idea. So the left brain goes, it breaks down what the right brain has given it. Now, when these are working in concert with each other, they're working together collaboratively. This has now been unpacked. The left brain returns to the right brain, where the right brain now has a much more expanded view of its own project, and it goes, wow. So it does further synthesizing. I've got this massive aha. Okay, let's make more ahas. Hey, left brain pal, can you break this down for me some more? And again, when they're working in tandem with each other and teamwork with each other, that's what they do. It's passed back and forth, back and forth. But as we're seeing in our modern culture, especially in the West, there's this very strong mechanistic, reductionistic, materialistic point of view, very results-driven, very power-driven, very status-driven, very external-driven. And that is what happens when the left brain, which is the emissary, tries to usurp the master, tries to say, I'm the one that's charming, alarming, irresistible. I'm the one that actually unpacks your ideas. I do all the work.
I'm it.
So, yeah, I'm the thing. So right brain, you go take a hike. We don't need you anymore. And this is this overconsumption with needing to be right, needing to be like, they need to be right, needing to, have all the results. Prove it. I'm not gullible. Where's the right brain is okay. Yeah, it's as is. If I'm not okay, there's other things. It doesn't need to prove it. It understands things holistically, telepathically. It doesn't need all of this delineation. It just gets it. So the book goes into that, and it kind of explains how ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. It's seen in the macro, it's seen in the micro, it's seen throughout the sine wave of how, the empires rise and fall, and it shows, through history as the empires become more entrenched in this mechanistic type of thinking, that's usually when they're in their height of power. But as we know, the moment they're in their height, you're at your peak, you're going to fall right down. Woof. So, I always say it's good to be in synthesis. It's good to be in balance. So that's what the book is talking about, and it's very fascinating. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's into that stuff, whether you're a psychologist or, brain and behaviorist, or you just love to research out of things. Either way, it's great stuff.
I shall have to check it out, add it to the list. It sounds really fascinating. As you said, like, it's interesting that the two halves of the brain at one point coalesce and work with each other off a notion or an idea. I said both parts, each part of the brain has a defined function with the idea. So one is trying to craft down or break down, I should say, the initial idea into the parts that will be understandable, the tasks involved, etc., unpacking it, as you say. And the other hemisphere will be about, continuing the creativity. What other ideas can you spark off? But as you said, there's a danger that the emissary becomes the sense of, I'm it, I'm enough. And the link to religion, where we touched on, was about Adam and Eve, essentially eating from the tree of knowledge. That was maybe a first written down representation of, say, the ego trying to overthrow God. And actually, I noticed one of your posts today actually talking about the same example. I'll just quickly bring it up a second about, the land of confusion, where, in fact, if we mix that in with our need to be right, sometimes we throw ourselves into that confusion over being right, because we overthink things. We, I guess, as I say, form that bond between our opinion and self-worth even stronger. So now that we've got that real need to be right. But I wonder if you could just walk us through that Adam and Eve example, because it was a really great point that we made there.
Yeah, and everyone just just a disclaimer, everyone has his or her belief. I totally respect it. Just respect that this is done respectfully. People can believe how they wish. And I was gonna say, I did post about this because I got a clairvoyant download. I mean, it's stuff that I think about, but I get those clairvoyant right brain downloads, and I'm like, oh, I'm in the middle of it's like whatever, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I just finished my sunrise bike ride, and I get to the gym, and I'm on the machine, and I'm like, oh, I got it. I start typing it out.
Stop the world. I need to get this down.
Exactly. So I'm writing down this thing because, what happened was, the radio was playing The Land of Confusion. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of what sparked it off. And then in my peripheral, I'm thinking about it anyways. So basically, Adam and Eve, the idea of also, they were challenged because as they were created, it's before they had eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there was they were sort of at a oneness with God. Now, what does that exactly mean? We don't know for sure, but they once they had eaten from the tree, the Bible, the text says they realized that they were naked, and they realized that they were separate. And my understanding of, that's the separation of the right brain and the left brain. Like, now there's a dichotomy, because now there's this awareness of separatism. So on the one hand, it's the unfoldment of individuality, of self-consciousness, of the sense of self, which I believe is a very crucial step. So I think that actually needed to happen. But the issue was that they transgressed the word of God. So I don't like the word sin, but that's what the sin for itself was, that they were insubordinate. But my personal belief is that for itself, had they taken self-responsibility when they were confronted by God, they basically just shoved the blame. Adam says, no, it's the woman that you gave me. She made me eat. And then Eve said, no, it's the snake. He tempted me to eat, and nobody took any self-responsibility, which also demonstrates there's this separateness, because if we understood we were all part of the same source, that when God would have confronted them, they would have realized, oh, I've unplugged from the source. Like, oi, it's just like a warning sign. And they would have admitted, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I did that. Okay, let me reconnect. Let me return to source. And there's a concept also, the Hebrew word is teshuvah, which means to return, to return to source. And a lot of times it's misinterpreted as this like atonement. Oh, please forgive me. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. And everyone's all goody, goody, good. That's not what it is. It's a genuine returning, understanding what you did, retrieving the lesson, and going back and saying, I'm going to repair this. I'm going to learn from my error and make it better. Which, had that been the step, we would have been connected again. But since everyone was shoving the blame, this is what demonstrated the dichotomy, where we're hiding in our land of confusion, in our state of separatism, and not trusting ourselves, not trusting the source. The sense of self is now damaged, and we're afraid to confront ourselves. So a lot of people have this image of this very angry God in the sky with a battering ram saying, okay, you're banished, get out. But I understand that's not the case at all, that we are of the source is of us. We're all together interwoven through this universe. And because now our mindset as humankind is of this separatism, that could not be congruent with the oneness of the garden. So it just by default, by the laws of cause and effect, it's unsustainable. So there was no choice for us but to leave until we can figure it out through this journey of confusion, of separatism, of dichotomy, of entropy, of materialism, whatever you want to call it. And once we are able to reconnect to source, whatever that is to you, and there's no wrong way to do it, we will then bring ourselves to that state. And people on an individual level can do it. That's, the spiritual enlightenment, again, which is not sitting on the mountains saying I'm better than everybody else and my way is the way. It's basically just your own personal finding spirituality, alchemy in the mundane, even if that's, for mothers changing their kids' diapers, or, people at work going to your work, being of service, helping somebody, just even saying hello, even just meditating, giving love to somebody. There's incredible power with that. And I have personal stories, also topics for another time, to explain just how powerful sending people love is. I saw it heal 3 people in a week's time. Incredible. So that's what it means to just bring ourselves back to source. And that's, I believe, the story of Adam and Eve within us all, that how can we bring ourselves back to source, back to who we really are at the essence, non-judgmentally, without beating ourselves up, without wagging our fingers at our brothers and sisters, and understanding that it's respecting the differences that makes us one. It's combined together, which make harmony, and it's the reunification of opposites that creates a whole. So that's how I understood it.
Really, really well put. There's so much value to unpack out of that. I mean, I think you've articulated where the need to be right comes from. It's driven by ego. The story in the book of Genesis gives us the notion that at some point we develop that ego as humankind to think that, right, we know everything, we can handle decisions and make it without respecting rules or whatever. So it's very ego driven, this need to be right. And if we're not seen to be right, then it's somebody else's fault. As you mentioned, Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the snake. To apply the example in our world today, we have a victim/blame culture going on. It's always somebody else's fault. He, she, it, they made me do or say X. So if we go back to what we're saying about our opinion and self-worth being interlinked, then we can very easily see where the need to be right comes from. It's very ego driven to say that, right, I've got to look acceptable, I've got to look well informed, and if I don't, then my status goes down, my ego takes a hit, and my core human needs aren't met. I'm not significant because we have a core human need of significance, because now people don't see you as a figure of authority or a knowledgeable person, and we may lose connection to people, which again is one of our core human needs, the connection to other people. You gave a religious example. Now, for those of you that saw the ad, this is where the Beatles come in. So the Beatles, via John Lennon, famously said that at one point they were bigger than Jesus. I mean, to quote John Lennon exactly, he mentioned in an interview that, the idea of Christianity as we know it will go, because at the moment the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, and he sort of debated out loud going, I don't know which one will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Now that felt on very deaf ears, especially in America where they were touring, which led to a massive reaction to people in America, especially in those states that are more attuned to religion and take it very seriously. So there was a lot of boycotting of their material. Radio shows, refused to play it. There were public burnings of their records and merchandise and all that kind of thing. So, they took it to a massive hit. And if you read up about what actually then happened, it was a major factor in their decision not to tour any longer. Pretty shortly after that, quote, which the interview came from, attuned with other factors, they decided to, right, we're just going to be a studio band now. But there's, I guess, a more Mondev example of, again, the ego being present in the decisions that they make. And although that might not be an explicit example of the need to be right, but our ego can influence the fact that, no, you are right to say this. So on the face of it, the controversy also comes with the idea that you've gone above your station. You're in a position that you feel that, right, you're almost invincible now. So, I mentioned ego battles before, where, we're in discussions, we're in debates, etc. And not only do we want to prove that we're right, but that other people are wrong. So interesting, we augment the need to be right, both by what we saying and doing is correct, but by the other person or people being wrong. Now, again, where does that come from? The ego driving the need to meet your own core human and practical needs. So I talked about significance and connection. A practical need is that we actually then get heard. So if you think about things like shock value or marketing, those kind of examples where they might lead with a strong opinion or a controversial opinion, or saying to, in essence, get eyes and ears on what they're saying. Why? Because they have a practical need as a human to be heard. And where does that come from? That goes back to things like programming experiences. You might not have been heard much as a child. You were told to quieten down or tone it down. So in essence, your voice was suppressed, but you still naturally felt those emotions and thoughts, etc., come up. But now in the future, you're still trying to meet them through fueling your need to be right via controversy. So there's two distinct examples of religion and the Beatles, both depicted as egos fueling our need to be right. And just to finish up on this point, even if we take away the Beatles example and religious examples, we could see it in things like motivational sayings. There's one that I see a fair bit of, always look to improve 1% more than you were yesterday. Which, if you think about it from a mathematical constraints perspective, that is implying that in 100 days, you'll be 100% better, which is, I think, a very defined way of looking at it. The idea that your ego is driving that need to change every day, that you have to prove yourself every time. And that itself can be both difficult and very onerous to upkeep. So it goes back to the whole point of like, well, how can we begin to stay away from it? You gave some great examples just now about respecting others' views, showing compassion, and what you said before about the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. I'll go on to talk about another example or a technique that we could use shortly. But I just then want to move this conversation on to, well, we've, I guess, found out that where does it come from, and perhaps on why it is there. But I wonder if we could explore that question of why is that need to be right there. What would you say?
Okay, so it's an interesting question, and I don't think there's really one definitive answer. I think, Darwin didn't get it 100% wrong. There is a survival of the fittest, because if we look at ourselves, I see us that we are human beings. We are physical beings having a spiritual experience, but we're also souls, and we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. It coexists, and the idea of coexistence, that's collaboration, that's teamwork. That is something that the ego self doesn't really get. It looks for competition. It's looking for that we're number one thing. So there's only room for one king in the castle. There's not room, the good old saying, there can't be two kings in one castle. It just doesn't go. So from the ego's point of view, it's, all or nothing, black and white thinking. But there actually is a higher point of view, the more collaborative point of view, that there are many ways. So going back to your example of, if you just improve yourself 1% every single day, you're getting 1% better. Now, if you're looking at, like you mentioned, from the mathematical constraint, yes, in 100 days you've maxed out. And that's basically what the ego understands, that the survival of the fittest understands competition. You either get the food or you don't get the food. If you get the food, you're alpha, keep going, next level, and ad infinitum. But here's the thing. If you look at the universe as, like in calculus, you've got the exponential and logarithmic functions, which basically demonstrate you're going to approach infinity and zero respectively, but never meet it. You're going to get closer and closer and closer, but due to the limits of the universe, you're never going to get there. So in an open system with the 1% better, you're going to continue to get 1% better every single day, as long as you're putting in that, that effort. And when I say effort from the will, I don't mean willpower where you have to like muscle it up. I mean the divine will, where you're following a will which is, again, greater than the sum of its parts. And when you're attached to that, you're very okay, getting 1% better, knowing that you're never going to get to the top of the stairway, because, no human being can do that, but that's what makes it exciting. You never wake up feeling like, well, there's nothing left to do. I've hit 100%. Now what? My life is dead. I'm screwed. There's always something exciting. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to do. And even though on the one hand, it might sound like I'm in this catacomb, I'm never going to get out of there. Think about it, guys. Who has ever hit a goal, and then once they get there, it's like, okay, now what? I'm bored. Like, what am I going to do with my life? I'm going to fall apart. Like, I think there's some, I forget which terminology they call it, the dark night of the soul, where it's like, there's nothing left to live for. I'm going to like obliterate, up in flames. And people experience, real depression, real anxiety, real things. Like, they get very, very dark. And a lot of them just, they'll stop the journey. Eventually they usually find it back again. But that's the beauty of when you get 1% better, knowing that your threshold is infinity. You're always going to get better and better and better. There's no constraint. And I think understanding that there's no constraint helps us with that need to be right, because I can be right vis-a-vis myself. It's like, I can sit there and say, watermelon is super healthy. It's amazing. I love it. I eat it every single day. It is great. Someone who has diabetes will sit there and say, but that's not healthy for me. If I eat it, my blood sugar goes nuts. Who's right? Well, it's the watermelon is both. That's the superposition. It's the isness of both. It has both. But just for me, my respective perspective on it is, I collapse in the wave function. It's healthy because I'm not experiencing the diabetes. A diabetic with that, perspective will collapse. It gives me it messes my blood sugar. It's not healthy at all, and it's both correct. So no one's really right, no one's really wrong, and I think the need to be right is a false sense of security.
Yeah.
Always looking like, just please, if I do it right, just guarantee me my tickets into heaven, or if I really, really screw it up enough, have sympathy on me and then just give me a pass. I don't have to deal with this. Like, I see a lot of the victim mentality. It's like, look, universe, I can't do it. Just feel bad for me. Give me a free pass to heaven. Feel bad for me. Woe is me. Woe is me. And we think we're going to get by. And I think that need for security, that false sense of, I need the externals to buy my security, is where this need is driven in such a deep level. In addition to the programming, if someone has never been heard, they will keep trying to use externals to meet that need, that very deep need, until they realize it's a self-soothing process, again, that has no definitive it's a stairway to infinity, no definitive end. It's just an unfoldment that the more we practice, the stronger we become, just like any skill set.
I love that. That's awesome. Like, you've literally disarmed one of those phrases that, you know, buzz phrases that we see around, by literally take away the mathematical constraint. The idea of improving and self-improvement is enough in itself. Once, as you say, you can find restraints or boundaries around it, then, as you said, it's a temptation that you get to that 100%. You look around going, shit, is that it? And then, as you say, you're stuck. You're like, now where? I akin it to when you know, set a goal, whatever it might be, you work towards a goal. So one of two things happens. You either run out of momentum or enthusiasm, and you dwindle and you go, right, I'm lazy. Can't stick to goals. I'm indecisive. So you perpetuate self-hate cycles, or you end up achieving the goal. And again, you look around and go, that didn't really satisfy me or fulfill me. And you see the next shiny object or goal, and you go after that. You know, studies have proven, for example, that Olympic silver medalists, when they win, are more happier than the gold medalists, which sounds counterintuitive at first. But when you think about it on a level, you have the silver medalist who can still celebrate their achievement and go, right, I still have the gold medal to aim for. Whereas the gold medalist will take the applause, go around the stadium, take the interviews, etc., have the gold medal as the memory and symbol of their achievement. But then what? You know, what do they next go on to? And, you know, come back to your idea of, you know, why it's there is, as you say, is very ego driven, like we've gone through. I would also add that it's self-affirming, that we seek that external validation that we're correct to satisfy our core human needs, when, as you mentioned, the answers are actually inside us, because what's right for us is our own. I forget the exact wording of the phrase, but I think, is it Henry Ford that said, whatever you think of the world, you'd be right, or something along those lines.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a live example actually in the last week or so, which leads me into this technique I'm about to share. That if you'll indulge me for a second, it's a bit of a kind of maybe UK-centric example, because it involves the cricket, which is the Ashes. So it's a historical rivalry of England versus Australia. And without going into the technicalities, I went to the stadium last Sunday at Lord's in London, and something happened in the game which triggered days of debate afterwards. The idea that something happened in the game where Australia, basically, you could say, bent the rules, or should I say gentlemanly code of conduct, to give them an advantage in the game. So some said, some had the interpretation of was it against the rules, and some had the idea, was it against the spirit of the game? And, you know, debate raged on for ages. Live, when I was there, I was literally fixated on one side, like, they're cheating, and the whole crowd got into it, and it was all the idea that, you know, they're trying to make an advantage and all this kind of thing. But as I looked into the debate afterwards, I wanted to, you know, debate more and literally get my thoughts out. I could feel my self-worth really linked to this opinion. But as I read more about it and just sort of let the emotions flow through, this technique that came through was really powerful. So that technique I call is a 3-worded phrase called "maybe you're right." So what "maybe you're right" does, it introduces the concept that, like I said before, the person opposite might be saying something you completely disagree with on the face of it. So, for example, Australia, a lot of Australian media and the team said, "No, we did nothing wrong. It's in the rules, and everybody else will do it." Now, at the time, I went, "No, you don't. You're this and that and the other." But when I looked at it and going, yeah, as I said, they didn't do anything illegal per se. So I can now begin to unlink my opinion from my self-worth, going, yeah, they could be right, and I can still change my opinion for it. Now, the reason that's important is that it harks back to during my time with my coach, is that what you reflect, you project. So what I was actually seeing is the fact that, you know, I'm an England supporter. I was seeing my team being cheated or circumnavigated by somebody, in the same way that I feel in my life that there are other people out to seek advantage of me or, utilize me for their own benefit. So I was literally seeing my life played out on the cricket pitch. So when I came back to the example, I'm like, okay, maybe they're right. Immediately, I can drop the need and the pressure to be right. So I don't have to vociferously claim to anybody and get into arguments about, they were a cheat and they were this and they were that. I go, do you know what? Yeah. And the other overarching example, it's nothing to do with me, actually. We seem to, live vicariously through external factors sometimes. But that simple phrase I've used a lot of the time and keep practicing it, because it gives you the idea that your ego begins to acquiesce to the idea that, like, I don't have to be right about this. I don't need to then hang my self-worth on it. And just by that very phrase, your self-worth just creeps up slightly, because you're no longer engaged in this threat to your self-worth, the ego battle, and the idea that you might go for an emotion you don't want to feel. So for anyone listening or watching, try the phrase, maybe you're right. Let's see how you get on with it. It's really powerful, and it does take practice. It's not easy. You're not just going to go, maybe you're right in every discussion or debate or argument they may have, but it just begins to ground yourself and offer you the way forward.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It's similar to I do something also when emotions show up that that are frightening. A lot of times, it's very easy to resist. Like, oh no, I'm past this. Like, I'm having fear. If I have fear, that means I'm bad. And if I'm not trusting, and if I'm not trusting, that means everything that I don't want to manifest is going to manifest. So push it down, push it down, push it down. Don't tell the universe I'm having fear. So I read about it in a book, and I forget which book this is called, but he says basically, let it come, let it pass, let it leave. A lot of books on surrender and letting go talk about this in some way, shape, or form. So I went through this. I even just also personal stories this past week. I had some very unpleasant emotions showing up, and I was very frightened. And I started to feel scared, and I said, okay, instead of pretending that I wasn't scared, saying I'm going to be tough, I'm not going to let this bother me, let's just macho it on. I said it out loud.
Positivity.
Exactly. I said, no, I'm not going to. I am feeling very scared. I'm afraid about A, B, and C. And okay, I'm afraid of A, B, and C now. The question is why? And I said, well, the thing itself, I'm not worried about on the surface. I mean, I don't want the surface. Like, a lot of times the thing on the surface is not the thing we're worried about. It's like, sure, you don't want it to happen, but why don't you want it to happen? It's like, let's say for someone who's like, get they have like an addiction for eating, like they're trying to get over their binge eating, and this piece of chocolate cake, and now they're feeling the temptation, but they don't want to admit they're feeling it. Like, nope, I don't even want that piece of chocolate cake. Nope. But the truth is, you do. So like, to say, yep, I really want that chocolate cake, and now I'm feeling scared and inadequate. And okay, why am I feeling scared and inadequate? Because if I admit that I actually want it, I'm gonna like go all in and eat it all up and turn it to all my results that I've worked so hard for, all my health benefits are going to go down the toilet. And then you say, okay, so now what's beneath that? Because you're not really worried about that so much. What's beneath it? And it's like, well, if all my results go down the toilet, my parents are going to kill me. My spouse, children, parents, whoever, loved ones, they're going to kill me. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm projecting that to them. And you say, no, I'm going to kill me. I cannot live with myself knowing that I actually fell for this again. And it's usually some sort of feeling of, oh, I just lost myself. Everything that I worked for, my deepest core values, all my hard work is down the toilet. So we bury it. So I say, okay, no, I admit I am very scared. And I'm scared because I'm afraid I'm going to lose everything I worked so hard to achieve. Now we're going to let it come, pass, and leave. And guys, it will come up over and over. And just go through it again, and it'll come up. And if it comes up, don't think that, oh, I did it wrong the first time. It's going to keep showing up.
It's okay to feel.
Yeah, this is human. This is life. It's going to show up. It's going to show up. It doesn't go away. We just get stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like, when you're learning to ride a bicycle, that incline that was so hard to ride, it doesn't become less of an incline once you learn to ride. You get stronger, and it doesn't seem as difficult. So that's how this is. The incline of the experience doesn't go. You may always be tempted by that chocolate cake, but you get stronger. And then you realize, yeah, I want it, and that's okay. It's part of life. I will just lovingly walk away, and I'll give myself a very healthy treat. Like, I'm a chocoholic. I'll be the first to admit I'm very into health. It's a lifestyle of mine. And how I get the chocolate out of my system is I have all these blends of the unsweetened raw cocoa powder. And I mean, I'm telling you, I go on the internet, I order I have like 20 different flavors, and I mix them and I blend them. And, I mix them in my shakes and smoothies, and, I'll make it, like, let's say, mix it in avocado, make like an avocado pudding. And it can be healthy. You can do it healthy. So you find creative ways to have a more expanded version of the thing that you're afraid of.
Yeah. Well, I think therein lies a point that we made earlier, that when you approach any decision, you mentioned, chocolate cake, you're on a weight loss goal or binge eating, whatever. You're tempted by chocolate cake because you're a chocoholic, etc. Even in that decision whether to eat it or not, you have a spectrum of choices that you can make. You could either eat it whole, you could either eat a little bit, you could eat something else, you could not eat anything. All of those are all possible at that moment. But what our brains and systems default to via patterns, known behaviors, known responses, is to go, right, I'm going to make a decision to eat the cake, and I'm going to make that decision based on what I know. But a lot of the time, as you said, we default to the negative, because you think of the thing of like, if I eat this, everyone's going to kill me. I'm going to kill me for not sticking to my plan. Everyone's going to have a go at me, my family, my parents, my kids, whoever they might be. And you default to that even before you make the decision, going, right, if I try something, then they're going to have a go at me. So I'm not going to, take that option. So away from chocolate cake, this could be decisions that you're looking to make. Say, let's say you're going to present to something on stage, like a presentation, a speech, an interview. You just default to what's the worst thing that's going to happen. In another session, I'll talk about the idea that you can stem yourself away from that to the point where actually what happens doesn't matter. But I'll leave that for another session. But I think it was a great point you made there about, look, when we often are presented with the decision, we often think, right, there's got to be the one answer that's going to satisfy me and everybody. Now, we don't actively think about that at the moment. A lot of our decisions are made unconsciously, automatically. And yeah, you could go really granular into this work and go, right, look at every decision you're making and question the patterns and behaviors that come up. What for you is making that automatic decision? As you said, in a food example, what food choices are you making, for example? You could think about, okay, where does that come from? Am I eating, say, comfort or junk food because of I'm trying to hide a certain emotion, or that's what I've always been trained to do? Again, slightly going off on a tangent, which we might address next time, is that a lot of our old patterns and behaviors are subliminal. So there's a weight loss company, I think, primarily in Europe, called Noom, or Noomi, I think, that essentially, alongside diet plans and exercise plans, all that kind of thing, looks at the psychology of eating. So things like, were you, for example, in a large family as a kid, and lots of benevolent, aunties or uncles or whomever kept plying you with food for the sake of, like, you're growing boy or girl, or, they're trying to feed you with love, if you will. Always eat, keep eating. From an Indian background, I can empathize, where, you're always looking to be fed at every opportunity. But that contributes to how your eating habits have formed now. So, to round this all up in this session about the need to be right, when we utilize all the stuff we've talked about, that maybe there isn't a right answer, it's what's right for you at the time, and that decision is always reviewable, changeable. You don't have to fixate on something. Then gradually you'll begin to view the idea that I can be loose with my opinions and my decisions and what I hold. It's not to say we go from one extreme to the other and we be completely ambivalent and go, right, it doesn't matter. Obviously, we need to take some self-responsibility, as Nini outlined nicely before. But once we practice these things more and more, that inherent need to be right literally falls off automatically. And all of a sudden you find yourself going through life is more informed for you from a place of higher self-worth.
Yeah, no, and I agree that I like that the need to be right. There's no one way. And I read also, I think it was the Master and his emissary. They talk about truth is not this one fixed point. It's not a particle that you fixate on. And the truth is, even the subatomic particles that we think are so stable, they're in fields, they're in fluxes, they're constantly moving.
Right.
They're hazy. When you zoom up into the Planck scale, you realize it's all hazy probability waves when you go really, really close. So things that seem like they're fixed are not. So I really believe the truth is an unfoldment, and it's always in motion because everything in this physical universe is in motion, and that the subatomic particles that we think we collapse are just our personal perspectives based on our personal point of view. And yes, the need to be right. It's fuzzy. It's going to change, as we evolve, and just be open to allow life to flow through us.
Perfectly put. I think that's a great way to close out this session of emotional intelligence and quantum physics. If you like this session, please do the necessary, the old like and subscribe buttons, all that kind of thing, and check out our previous sessions on YouTube. And yeah, let us know what you think. If there's certain topics you want to see covered on the show, or any question that you have, feel free to comment on the video below, or find myself and Nini on the socials. We're more than happy to take questions, feedback, wherever you have them, so that we can give to you guys what you're looking for. Really, this is a fully free-flowing, flexible show. To be honest, Nini and I just put our heads together at some point in the week and decide what we want to talk about. But if someone's got a question, topic, situation they want to decode, feel free to let us know, and we'll try and do our best to fit that in for you. So Nini, any last words from you before we close up?
I think we're good. And again, thank you. It's a pleasure to do this, and I look forward to our next one. And feel free, reach out. Let us know if you want any topics covered. I like to research. I like to get my hands dirty. So definitely feel free.
Absolutely. Right. That'll do it for today, everybody. Feel supersonic, and we'll see you next time.